Hey friends, welcome to another episode of the 10 Laws Podcast with East Forest. I am Forest East, sitting here in the white blanketed first snow in southern Utah, which is always a pretty special feeling. I got down here just a couple days ago and the temperatures plummeted, which is like, it's always surprising how fast things can shift and change, as they have for us as a people, as a world, as a country, perhaps as individuals for you too. We have gotten past the election of all elections. I know there's like, this feeling sort of like, okay, if this election goes one way, perhaps that's like one choose your own adventure path that you kind of know the book now is going to be definitely more tumultuous and perhaps burn into flames. And if it goes the other way, it's like, okay, now it's going a different choose your own adventure path, which is better than going down in the flames we sort of know, but our savior is Wall Street corporate Democrats. which is kind of a crazy thought, but I'm still elated that we've just gotten through it. Oh my God, like so much tension and stress, and I'm sure a lot of you, it felt like the whole world was holding its breath, and that everything kind of was on pause. And I know we're never in times that are so assured that we're like, okay, now we know things, and so now we can move forward. I mean, we're still in such a dynamic time. Name the things you want to name, from climate change to the pandemic to economic collapse issues to systemic racism to it goes on and on and on. Just the intense sloughing of the snakeskin that we continue to find ourselves in. And we're heading towards the winter solstice, which traditionally is a time of introspection. Of course, for many of us, for let's say all of us, it's a lot of holidays coming up and emotions can come up. And it's hard this time, particularly this time of year, because this pandemic is going on and it's getting cold out, and a lot of people want to see people and friends. We're social beings, humans, and yet it's becoming much more challenging to thread that needle of our risk analysis. And for myself, I think about like whatever I may think about my personal risk in the pandemic. I think about what kind of karma do I want to take on? For my own like inadvertent spread or things like that. And these are issues that it's just one way I frame it in my mind. I'm not even trying to think of it as right or wrong. It's just like, risk analysis is one thing. What about karma analysis? So it's something that comes up for me. But a couple weeks ago, when I was down here in Boulder, I got the chance to talk to my good friend David Holladay, who is an amazing, amazing man. I tell the story right at the beginning of how we ran into each other and we were able to have this conversation at all. And I dragged him down to the studio. So this guy doesn't have a phone. He doesn't have an email address, certainly doesn't have a website, but he's one of the foremost primitive skill teachers in the entire world. Among just being someone who's been living with the land for decades upon decades, and that really starts to teach you things and change who you are. And I think he has an energy and exuberance that you'll find bubbles right to the surface in this conversation, and I think you'll find it incredibly unique and valuable. Just a few bits of housekeeping I want to share with you. Thank you for reviewing the podcast. We did cross over that 200 rating mark, and we had some lovely reviews come in. I just want to give a shout out to HandFan777, who said this is one of your favorite podcasts, and Hib69, a wonderful bridge. You said Buddhas. You're calling out to the Buddhas to listen to the podcast. That's a wonderful review. Terry Jane, Awareness, Snow Angel, thank you for putting those reviews on iTunes. Makes a big difference. I also want to let you know we've got a few new items in the merch store that you may be interested in for your holidays and getting an advanced jump on that kind of gift giving. We now have the painting that Elizabeth Hilton made for the Ram Dass album, which is beautiful, large portrait of Ram Dass, available as an archival art print. So it's a photographic print on beautiful Kodak luster paper. mounted. And it's in full size, 16 by 20. And there's also another medium size that's 12 inches by 12 inches. So the same size as a vinyl record. You can get those at eastforest.org. Hit the store button. And we also made a few bundles so you can save some money if you're looking to get, like, we have something called the ceremony chest, which is some toad lick and angel's rest perfume oils, and the Music for Mushrooms flash drive, high resolution album, a Nautilus pin, a dream journal. So there's even one bundle where it's called the whole enchilada, and you can get just about everything on the site and save a nice chunk of change. So if that interests you, check it out. That's over at eastforest.org. For myself, I'm going to continue my November run down here in Boulder. Rada comes down here at the end of the week, but for now, I'm doing the solo guy thing in the cold in a pandemic. I haven't seen a soul down here, which has been nice, but it's also been a little weird at times. I did another one of those Q&A, A&Qs on Instagram Live, and I'll continue to do those now and then. It's always great to talk to you guys, and it's a form of conversation with our community, with which I enjoy. And I'm working on, I don't know what to call it. It's another sort of medicine style, sort of like the Music for Mushrooms album. I'm culling through music that was recorded in these virtual ceremonies and working to make some kind of release with that. And these processes take a long time, but I mean, shit, it's like 5 different ceremonies, each of them 3 to 4 hours each. So we're looking at 20 plus hours of music. So I'm just kind of running through those and seeing what's there, which has been fun to go back in time because I don't remember what happened in those ceremonies necessarily. But you know when you're listening to it and everything starts to sound the same, or I'm just like judging it. It's time for me to take a break. Okay, my friends, you keep your head strong, you keep breathing. Let's dive into this wonderful conversation with our dear friend, David Holladay. I want to give people a little bit of context for where we are and how we ended up here today. Because this is, I feel like, often how things roll around Dave Holladay. So this morning, I just got here last night back into Boulder. And I woke up this morning and was kind of like, wow, I'm really excited to be here. But there's always a transition when I go back and forth. And I was doing some things in my place, in my trailer, and I was leaning on this area where I have like all my little necklaces and things. And there are many that have been there that I have been there for probably a couple years that I just haven't worn. They're just sitting there for whatever reason. And this one I'm wearing was kind of poking out underneath things, and I could have just seen it, but for some reason I thought, oh yeah, I want to wear that today. I want to wear that. I haven't worn that. And I put it on. It was a little tight on my head, and I got it on. I was like, oh, that feels good. And I went about my day, and eventually I had the thought that I thought, well, I'd really like to get out, and I want to go up and see the color. I'm going to go up on the mountain. And I was maybe going to go up like Chris Lake or something. I'm driving up, and I thought, oh, wait, King's Pasture. Yeah, why not? Let's go there. Turn off, and I'm driving up, and I see you and your family up there in the forest cutting down trees, dead trees for firewood for the winter. So I ran into you, and that's how I find you, is I run into you. And then I started to see the connection. I went and I helped you load the wood, and then I was like, oh, I wanted to do that podcast, and now we're sitting in the studio doing the podcast. And it's just often like there's a flow to your life. And the last time I saw you was about a month ago, and you were in your Stone Age month.
Yes.
So maybe you could just start there, because I am quite eager. I haven't really asked you about it on purpose.
Okay.
How are you feeling? How did that go? And why did you do it?
Yeah, I'll start with why. Ever since I was probably about 12, after finding a book, I was living in Guatemala, and I found a book in the Whole Earth catalog that answered some questions I'd had since about first grade, which was, how did people make stone tools? And I knew, even in first grade, when I saw Clovis points at the University of Arizona Museum, that the material they were made out of was harder than steel.
What is a Clovis point?
A Clovis point is a type of point found in Clovis, New Mexico that they traced back to the kind being used to hunt mammoths with.
So like a spear tip,
It's the point on the front of a spear that they were hunting mammoths with, maybe 13,000 years ago here on, or farther back on this continent, and 30,000 years ago in the other side of the ocean. So even as a first grader looking at some of these points that were found in Arizona at a mammoth kill site from 10,000 years ago, I knew that the points were made from something like agates and beautiful stones. And I remember saying to myself, looking through the glass, that's the kind of artist I want to be when I get big. Because I knew I wanted to be an artist. And I saw those points as art, not as tools. They were beautiful.
You also found one here.
Yeah.
That's one of the oldest. We got to get back to that later. But yeah.
So I always wondered, well, how'd they do that? And then later on, I think in like maybe fourth grade, I found a shell on the way to school sticking out of the mud. And I knew we were 300 or 400 miles from the nearest ocean. And it was a beautiful clam that I'd seen the kind I'd seen on the beach when we'd go to Mexico on vacation. And when I rubbed the mud off, it was made into a frog. It had been carved into a frog. So I went home and tried to get some of my seashells and make a dent in them with a file, and a file just slid, and a nail just slid. And I thought they must have had a grinding wheels. And I thought, no, they didn't have electricity. They didn't have carborundum stuff, no spin wheels. I thought, well, how did they do this? I started collecting a lot of how did people do stuff before metal? So all my life I wanted to learn how. I finally found a book while living in Guatemala as a 12-year-old in the Whole Earth catalog. Our family was there doing humanitarian service projects, and I would go down there in the summers and spend a lot of time I grew up real fast in 2 summers. School wasn't much for me, but I got straight A+ in summer vacation. Yeah. And so there I was looking at this book that described that it could teach you how to do all these things in this book catalog. And I went and asked my father for money. It's the first and last time I ever asked him for money in my entire life. And I was afraid to ask him. He was very stern, Scottish Welsh military colonel, Marine Corps colonel, fought in 2 wars, and we're trying to do service for poor people. And here I'm asking for $7 and something cents, when a man in Guatemala in those days made 1 quetzal every 4 days, which is equivalent of $1. So people were a 16-hour day got a man 25 cents.
Oh, wow.
So here I was trying to ask for $7 and something cents to order a book in a book catalog. And I got the courage up and I asked my dad for the money. And he said, basically, David, I believe that's a wise investment. And I was so totally shocked. And I never asked my dad for any money since. I never did. That was it. But the book came 6 months later in the mail.
6 months.
And I became a closet Aboriginal.
And not so closet now.
Well, I was 30-something before I came out of the closet. But I've always wanted to go live. I learned those skills not to practice something. I learned them because I wanted to be a caveman, a Stone Age person. And in the 60s and 70s, there were a lot of people who really did believe we could change the world. And I thought that only by stopping producing all the weird things we make that are wrecking the air and the water could we really benefit the earth. And although I knew it wasn't realistic for everybody to go hunter-gatherer, I thought at least I can. Mm-hmm. And so I was looking out the window all my school career during the 9 months of each school year at the mountains around Tucson saying, when I graduate, I'm getting up in those and I'm not coming back to town. So I believed I could. So that said, I always wanted to have a girlfriend and be part of a community, and I never found a community or a girlfriend that wanted to go do that.
Yeah.
So over and over again, I would like trade off
It's a battle.
one dream for
Yeah.
another.
Yeah.
I had lots of dreams and I couldn't do them all at the same time generally. So that said, even as I worked for 18 years as senior instructor for Boulder Outdoor Survival School, I by complete diosidencia, like God-based coincidence, I ran into Larry Dean Olson, the guy that wrote the book, when I was going to college by accident. It's a long story. I don't know if you want to hear that one right
Well,
now.
as you would say, we're time rich, I suppose.
Okay.
You know,
Well,
it's up to you.
I get a full. I'm a poor student, and somehow out of Tucson High School, I didn't think I was ever going to be scholastically capable to go to college, so I didn't ever fill out any college papers. I was going to go live in the mountains. I was
Right.
going to take my textbook, Larry Dean Olson's Outdoor Survival School, and just leave.
Like that was an actual plan.
Yeah, I was going to go live Stone Age. I didn't know how to plan stuff. I wasn't that kind of person. I still don't know how to plan, but I was going to follow my heart into out of town. My favorite place in the whole wide world is out of town. Doesn't matter what country it is. So I somehow, after lots of heartbreaks and bad girlfriend relationship, troubles in high school, somehow one day a scholarship shows up for a full ride scholarship. I think I had to pay my books, but the tuition and the housing and the food were paid for.
Wow.
For college. And I figured out my mom must have signed the paperwork because I didn't. But I get a scholarship. And I go there and I don't fit in at all.
Where was it?
Brigham Young University, Provo in 1974.
Okay.
And I was from a pretty multicultural, exciting background. A lot of Latino, Indian, Black culture. Only white kid in all pretty much like really diverse events. There were a few other whites, but they didn't hang out outside with other colors often. They were always in the library hiding. I was one of the few guys that was out doing stuff with all my friends, which in most of the sports I was in, there weren't a lot of other tan people. They were like brown, black, or red, red or whatever you want to call them. But so I was turning into like, I got a pretty heavy Mexican Indian accent living in Guatemala, and then hung out with all Yaquis at school. So I ended up sounding like Cheech and Chong, everybody tells me, after a while. I grew up in that environment, didn't know it didn't fit my face, wasn't looking in the mirror. So, yeah, I go to BYU and I'm not scholastically capable. I don't know why I'm there. I did great in art class. But I was getting kind of lonely, and so I'd go over to where all the Native Americans would hang out at their special hall that they had for study hall, and just sit and look at Navajos, with their superior attitudes, not talking to anybody that didn't speak their language, and even treating other natives poorly for not being Navajo. I found out that rednecks and racists come in all colors. So it was fun, but I was kind of lonely. Missed Arizona, missed culture, missed Mexico, missed Guatemala. And so I'd go to the cafeteria, had horrible food. It's the worst I ever ate in my life. The culture, not to make fun of it, but many colors, all one flavor at BYU in those days.
The 70s, you said?
Yeah.
Yeah.
There was people from all over the world there, but the flavor was all vanilla.
Right.
At BYU. And so I was just aching for something real. And I'd go for hikes up into the mountains up towards the Y and get back in those canyons and have a blast. But then the eventualities, you had got to go back to school. And so I started thinking, I want to meet a girl that maybe could live in a cave. Where would it? And I didn't want to go to the sewing,
Not going to find that at BYU.
I didn't want to go to the family health department. Well, I decided that the physical education building might be the place to go look for girls.
Who can live in a cave?
Well, so they got to be strong.
Yeah.
And so
that's one aspect, yes.
And I was super shy in those days, all right? I was super shy. I didn't know how to talk to people so much, and I looked like I didn't belong there. I was constantly being asked if I was walking through campus to go to school as a freshman or in high school. Like nobody believed I belonged on campus. I didn't look right. right. Maybe my hair was a bit too long touching my collar or something. I'd had long hair down to my waist my whole life, and I had to cut it to go to BYU, but I don't think I ever looked like I fit in those clothes or that hairstyle. So I still looked wild to people.
Right.
They could tell that I wasn't from around there. I could tell by their responses to me that they were wondering what I was doing on campus most of the time. I had to explain to them that I go to school here. So I decided that since the food's so crummy and there wasn't enough of it, that it had Helaman Halls or whatever in the cafeteria there. The ladies there were really nice people, the ladies that worked the cafeteria. And they had these big stainless steel pump things where you could pump all the ketchup and mustard and mayonnaise, but they also had peanut butter and honey. And then they had shakers full of cinnamon, like salt shaker looking things full of cinnamon. And then they had these big bowls of fruit, apples and oranges. And I thought, I went and asked them, like they had whole wheat or white bread that you could get all you wanted to fill up on after your lunch. And I began to ask the ladies, like, how much bread can I have? And they said, as much as you want. And I said, well, can I have a bread sack? And I would slice apples and oranges really thin, sprinkle honey on them, and then sprinkle peanut butter. I'd spread peanut butter on every slice of bread, put the apples and oranges in there, and sprinkle cinnamon all over them and close them back up. I could fill up an entire bread sack.
It sounds like John Muir going out to hike with crackers in a bag.
But I would go over to the PE department and just walk up and down the halls. I think it was
looking for a cave woman.
Yeah. And you can't tell who they really are. But you could sort of tell some people that were looking like me, like they had to cut off their hair and quit being hippies when they had to go to school and start being good kids. And so I kept looking for somebody that might look like they could just look me in the eye and already know who I was and I could know who they were. And a lot of romantic thoughts. And so, of course, I couldn't look at a girl in the eye up close. And so I just look at them talking to each other from a long distance, but I would never dare look at a girl from behind. So I never turned around and looked at them. I always looked at them from a distance, and as soon as they look up, I'd pretend like I was just eating my sandwich. So, of course, I never met anybody. But it was one of those days when I was trying that I was at the far end of the physical education building, the Richards building. I was on the south end of the Richards building on BYU campus. And a door was slightly ajar. And I know this is a long ways to get to why I wanted to do a Stone Age month, but it's coming.
It's all good.
Okay, good. In those days when projectors were playing a movie in a classroom, you could hear it for a long ways off, clack,
clack. Yeah.
And then also, if the door was slightly open, they fluttered. The lights fluttered in those rooms. They hadn't got the smooth films down yet. So I hear this clacking, I see the lights flashing, and I just peek at the very last door on the very last left door in the far southern end of the Richards building. And I peek through the door, and there's 4 Kalahari Bushmen from behind, sneaking up with their little bows, and way off in the distance, you could see the head of a giraffe sticking up through the grass, which was taller than these men. And they're being really stealthy, and their bows are really small, and everything about these men is like beautiful and petite. But they got hardly anything on. They got a string around their waist that holds up just a covering on their genitalia. So from behind, they look like those modern bathing suits for girls that, don't look like they got nothing on from the back. And I'm thinking, wow, what Brigham Young University professor has the courage to show a cool film like this? Is this an anthropology class? What's it doing in the phys ed building?
Mm-hmm.
But I was fascinated at these people who were living primitively in Africa, never seen anything like it. Turns out it was an anthropology film from the late 50s, filmed from about 50 yards away with long-distance cameras, which is brand new technology back then, right? But it's an amazing film, hard to find. But I get in there, and I get in the back of the room, and I just watch the film. It's a 14-day giraffe hunt of hunter-gatherers where they leave their village, they go catch some food, and then they send a runner back to get all the women and children. They come and they gut that thing up from the inside out. They start passing meat out the back end of that giraffe. And everybody's happy because they finally got lots of food.
That's a lot of meat.
It's amazing film. And the lights come on, and the guy that wrote the book that I'd gotten when I was in Guatemala was the professor of that class.
So you're looking for your cave woman.
And I find the teacher.
Uh-huh.
So that I kind of went on academic probation probably like that day. I didn't know it till later, but like I got very uninterested in all my other classes, and I just kind of quit going to class. I just kept looking for things to do. But Larry, at first, you got to understand, Larry's from a small town in Idaho. He almost didn't belong at college himself.
What's his last name?
Larry Dean Olson was his name. That was the book, and I knew him instantly when I saw him. But what I couldn't figure out is what's he doing in black slacks, a white shirt, and a tie,
right,
with his big black glasses on in a college. He's supposed to be off living like in the photographs in the book, in a cave or a teepee someplace. But I just was fascinated because there he had one of those long wooden sticks with the rubber thing on the end, pointing at the blackboard after the film was over. And he starts asking these really hard questions, except for they're not hard to me. Everybody else in the class has no idea what he's asking for, and he's getting no response. And I keep raising my hand, and I answer the first 3 questions he asks, and then he quits looking at me. And the whole rest of the class, he's trying to get his class to participate. When the bell rings, everybody splits like they're getting out from underneath some kind of pressure. And I just sit there. I learned years later that what Larry was teaching was so popular in those days, and you had to do a semester of his class before you could go on your 30-day trip. And you had to show capacities in all the things he was teaching in his book.
He was offering a 30-day wilderness trip?
Yes, but you had to take a semester of class first to prepare for that. And BYU was on board, and they were like, really, this experiential education was really taking off all over the world. But his program was one of the most famous on the planet at that point. So lots of people, no matter what class you were taking, whatever your degree was going to be in, you could fast track your college education, no matter what your curriculum was, by doing this and then writing a paper about what your experience was for the 30-day trip. So lots of people who had no interest at all in the outdoors or primitive living were taking that class to fast track their science degree, their humanities, whatever,
Yeah.
So he had a lot of people in the class that had no clue what he was talking about, but were going to do it because they helped him get through school faster.
But I'm guessing the two of you connected, and somehow that connects the dots to you fast-tracking your caveman life.
Everybody splits, and I'm sitting in the back of the room, and he was not a real socially adept guy in some ways, sometimes on purpose and sometimes just like a curious little kid, like a huge, an interesting man. But what I mean by, he wasn't a big man, but in those days his forearms were really big, and you could tell it's like somebody put a haircut and some glasses on a caveman and made him put regular human clothes on, because he just didn't fit in clothes. He looked goofy, but not because he was goofy, but because he was stuck in a world where he just had to put clothes on to be a professor at a college. So he walks over and he leans over the top of me and he goes, "You're not my class, are you?" And he doesn't smile. I'm like, dang it, I'm going to get in trouble again. My whole life in school, I'm always having to get sent to the dean. I straighten up. I try to be a good person. Here I am at college, and this guy's going to send me to the dean for busting in his class without asking. He goes, "Come in my office." Doesn't smile. I obediently get up and follow him because, like, busted again. I try to change my life, and here I am. I'm not a good person. They can see it. They can see it in me that I don't belong here. And instead, he puts his feet up on the desk, puts his hand behind his head, and he goes, "Tell me about yourself, Dave." So I tell him about living in Guatemala for a while, about practicing his book ever since I was 12 and, loving everything that I learned in there. And he goes, "Well, how'd you like to go on the trail with us, Dave?" And I said, "No, sir, that's a lot of money. I don't have $400. I can't afford that for your 30-day trips. I'd love to, but I can't afford that. Plus," I said, "I got your book and I know how to do everything in it." and that's the first smile that he gave, because that's kind of a cocky statement. I didn't know. That's probably the dumbest thing I said to an adult in my life up to that point. But he laughed and he goes, no, I don't think you understand me. I don't want you to pay me. Could I pay you to be my lab assistant for the rest of the year?
Just like that.
Just like that. We hadn't been talking for more than 15 minutes. And so he was coming down to this part of the world. Every Friday at 2, we got in 14-seater vans with lots of students. We came down and practitioned.
Down to here?
Yeah, gathering the materials and making the stuff in his book so that when they went on their 30-day trip, they'd already know how to produce the things they needed for their trip.
And so were they going on a wilderness survival trip or more like primitive skills?
Yeah, they were going to go on what you would call the standard boss 28-day trip.
No kidding.
Yeah.
Back then.
And well, boss came out of that whole thing. So that's what that was. So they got all their patterns and formats basically out of the BYU programs. And
Amazing.
Their permits for operation, everything. So I didn't know that. I just was going with Larry Dean Olson wherever he asked me to go, because I was going to get to go out into the wild and start doing what I'd wanted to do my whole life.
And eventually, though, you came down here living and teaching. But you told me just before we started talking that when you were living down on Deer Creek, no one was, and you were just you had kids and stuff.
That was way later.
Later.
I've lived about 6 lives. I've had things go high and then fall apart and go low. I've been in love and had my heart broken at least 6 times. Like the real deal where I'm going to live forever with my babe, and then it doesn't work out so hot. So I that's a whole other issue and story. But I'm just saying.
6 stories.
Yeah, I have lived a lot of lives. Yeah. So there's a whole lot between that and the Stone Age mix. So I'm gonna fast track.
Whatever you like. Yeah.
All I'm saying is, since that time, every job I've ever taken and the list of things I've done for a living is way too long to talk about. Some highlights would be I worked for the sanctuary movement, helping bring people from El Salvador into the United States during the Civil War in El Salvador in the 80s. I was a school teacher, Tucson Unified School Districts. I taught environmental education for K through 12 programs, 68 high schools or something like that, 70 something middle schools, and I forget how many elementary schools that, it's 18 high schools, 70 something elementary schools,
70
and 14 middle schools. Yeah, it was a huge and beautiful job with all walks of life and all colors and all socioeconomic backgrounds. And my job was to teach Arizona history and prehistory and flora and fauna at this environmental studies camp. It was wonderful. Camp Cooper out of Tucson. And so I've done a lot of things, mostly worked construction, trying to make enough money to go live in a cave and find a girlfriend. And somehow cars always became, pickup trucks became like the way to get out of town. And then I would finally establish myself and give the vehicle away so I didn't have to own one. So my MO is to buy them and then give them away to somebody who needs a car, because I keep pretending like I'm going to live without one.
So did you find your cave woman?
Yeah, finally. But yeah, that's pretty recent. So let's jump a bunch of heartbreak and trouble and fun and being a single dad for 12 years and lots of story to say that back when I was like a hotshot primitive skills guy and young and handsome and strong in my 30s, I was kind of a well-known person in the primitive skills world, and especially in the Stone Age aspects of it and the outdoor education. And I was always planning these Stone Age years. But I'd always end up maybe getting a girlfriend, or I got married for a while. I did a lot of stuff, and I always had a kid since I was 23. I was a single parent, so I always had somebody that either had to do it with me. And I told you some of the stories about Juan and all that. So it never happened. And I was always getting these people, I was watching these people that focused on their Stone Age life skills, that were going to go do the real thing. And they would always kind of leave their families behind. They didn't quite stick with their mates or their kids. And I kind of realized that I lost Gloria and my first really real healthy family because I was always on the trail with Boss, Boulder Outdoor Survival School. So it kind of dawned on me that I kind of was trying to do my dream and buy houses and cars for everybody else. And I kind of didn't ever get out for very long. The longest I ever was out was 3 months.
But
And that was when I was with Juan.
But just to demarcate between
yeah.
Stone Age life, as you're saying it, versus like in a lot of ways, the way you lived major parts of your life might not have been to the strict Stone Age, but you were pretty much.
I was still
in a teepee at times,
I paid off a lot of cars and a lot of houses and especially some Toyotas with rock sticks and bones and teaching about how to be on the land by doing it rather than talking about it. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So I had a pretty dang good run, but here's the final, like, how did I get to my Stone Age month last month?
Yeah.
Is at one point, after lots of heartbreak and trouble and still in love with everybody I've ever loved and always feeling like I really wasn't there for my people sometimes because I was busy giving my best to clients, people that were taking on the trail. I finally met Jill at Anasazi youth programs, which was started by Larry Olson years later. And she and I knew I liked her right off the bat. She had no clue that she was ever going to like me at all. And she didn't waste any time pretending that I could ever like her. She'd always tell me, there's no way I'd like some old guy like you. I was 40-something and she was 20-something. And so I didn't pursue her, but I just liked her. Right? And so she was always choosing me as her partner for long 1-month trips for Boulder Outdoor Survival School. And she was always working with me at Anasazi youth programs out on the trail. So we became, friends. I secretly knew that I liked her too much, but I never told her. It took me about 7 years to finally tell her that I can't work with you anymore because it messes me up. I can't sleep when you're around. I know you don't like me, so I'm not proposing to you or anything. I'm just telling you, find somebody else to work with because you mess me up. I can't function when you're around. I don't sleep at night if you're anywhere within about 20 feet of me. So that was way later. But anyway, after all that fell apart, one day she was talking about getting married, and I was like, well, yeah. And I said, but I still want to do a Stone Age year. And she looked me in the eye and said, well, you got to choose between me or your Stone Age fantasies. And at this point, I'm 50 years old. I got married to Jill when I was 50. Mm-hmm. And I don't know why I thought I was invincible and going to last that long. But like, it's been 15 years and it's been a good ride. But I'm realizing, that's thinking you're going to live forever. Mm-hmm. Getting married at 50 to somebody that's 19 years younger than you. But she's really good at being a good mom, and she's really good at everything she puts her hand to. So she started noticing me kind of getting older and getting kind of like I wasn't, completely thrilled about everything some days, just making money so we could, put into gas or groceries or whatever. Because I've lived a lot of big adventures and had a wonderful life, and I'm happy. I don't want to go anywhere. But she said, hey, David, what about that Stone Age thing? Do you still want to do that? She goes, maybe you could do that. And I'm like, you mean a year? And she goes, I don't know. No, how about, and I said, and I've been thinking about it. I've been reworking this thing for years. I said, what if I don't have to go away? What if I just move across the creek, build myself a little like hakal, and get all my Stone Age tools and just live Stone Age for a month across the creek?
Yeah. You can be a Stone Age man and talk to anyone you want.
And my family can come visit me.
Yeah.
And I can even walk across the creek and go over and visit them.
Yeah.
And so I made up all these rules about what I could or couldn't do. And then one day it dawned on me, I don't want to be Hasidic about this and say, I can't touch this, can't eat that. Like, what if my rules were that anything I could accomplish with my hands, my feet, my mouth, and my body, and any tool that's pre-steel.
So wood, stone.
Anything. Even copper.
You told me copper if you found it.
If I pounded it into shape with rocks.
Uh-huh. Mm-hmm.
So I proposed that to Jill, and she said, great. And she kept encouraging me to do that. And I'm like, thank you. So I did it. And so on the 16th of August of this year, decided to, after setting, I said, I gave myself a chance to set everything up with any process I want. But on the 16th, I had to quit using modern tools, plastic or anything else, to accomplish any task. And I didn't plan on having any students because the COVID chased everybody off from I was booked from April all the way to September
Yeah, I mean,
with classes.
our East Forest retreat was part of
Yeah,
that.
and they definitely weren't showing up. So I try to be alone. I do my thing. I'm home a lot, across the creek, being a Stone Age man. And then students just start showing up.
Just appearing.
Just appearing. So money was coming in better than normal for Jill. So her husband, who was doing his little fantasy across the creek, is doing what husbands are supposed to do, which is being there and making money. I got to do both by not going anywhere. Like, I learned a huge lesson. Slow way down, get really happy, do what you love, and the rest shows up. Now, I knew that before.
Yeah, I'd say that described you before.
Yeah, but this is like really settling into that, to the knowledge of faith. For a guy that hasn't had a real job like since the 80s, I really got that settled now, that when you're doing what you're supposed to be doing with your life, things happen. Magic, if you want to call it that. I don't believe it. I believe that things feel magical, but they are direct results to basically eternal law. That when you do what you're supposed to be doing, even if it's your day to die, it's going to be a wonderful death.
And how
You're
do
going to use your life the way it was meant to be used.
and that's the magic of people wanting to discover for themselves what their life is meant to be used for.
And of course, when you focus on something that beautiful and you're really into it, all kinds of stuff are going to show up to keep that from happening. So on the most peaceful days is when people would show up and need me to talk to them about how to make a fire or do. I mean, lots of things happened. Lots of beautiful people showed up. But one of the saddest things that happened is one day I had 4 students that had gone into town to finally get their soda pops and snacks after about 4 days. And they were going to go out on their solos. And they went to Hills and Hollows to get some treats. And they ran into Patrick. And Patrick and America, my daughter, said that my daughter Susanna had been in a terrible accident and that she was in the hospital in St. George. So they came back and said, hey, you're going to have to drop your, class and drop this Stone Age thing. You get your clean clothes on and get the hell, out of here and go to St. George. And I make it into town. I run into my son Leonardo just as I'm getting to the 12. And he says, Dad, don't go visit Gloria and don't visit America. They've been up all night. But Susanna called this morning and she talked to Chloe, her daughter. It's like, that's a good sign. Somebody's calling somebody on a phone from the hospital. That means they're like coherent.
Mm-hmm.
And then he says, hey, before you think of going to see her, just know that because of the COVID, they won't let you in the hospital. And I'm like, yeah, I could just go out and bang on the door and have them put me in jail. And I could say I tried. And he said, well, before you do that, you should go see the wreck site. And so day 20 of my Stone Age month, I got in a car, put shoes on, drove a car, and I got as far as Salt Gulch out to see the wreck site. And when I saw the physicality and the physics behind what had happened, my knees buckled out from under me and I began to weep and saw that no human being should be alive after that.
Was it an animal or?
No, it just late at night and gravel but bottom line is the distance she flew and the place she landed and how messed up the truck was. I think, one pinon tree saved her life and the angels saved her life. A combination. But without getting too much into her wreck, I didn't believe a human being should be alive after that. Mm-hmm. But I got comforted when I heard that she'd been talking. Okay. And that she's walking and they're going to let her out of the hospital.
Wow.
So then I went back to my students and I said, I think she's going to be okay. And they said, well, we're really grateful that you're going to prepare for us to put us out on solo, but you can leave anytime. So I put my students out on their solos, got them all prepared, let them come back in the next day, 24 hours later. And then when they were preparing to leave, I looked at Jill and I said, I got to get out of here. So everything went smoothly and nicely. And then I got in my car and drove to St. George because she had been released from the hospital.
Yeah.
So in the middle of I made a plan way early that whenever you try to do something like that, there's a funeral or something happens, you got to go. So I said, it's okay for me to stop in the middle and go do something, but I got to come back and finish up.
Sure. Plans are just there to shift anyway, but
anyway,
you
it happened and I got through it all, but I went back and had some wonderful times praying. Now, I want to get serious now about one thing.
Mm-hmm.
I had a lot of time to pray and a lot of time to meditate and a lot of time to be really settled because I didn't have a lot of visitors at night. It was always in the daytime and then they'd go home.
Right.
So I'm by myself. Even if you're across the creek in Deer Creek, you're a long ways away from people and you can hear the mountain lions and everybody else going by and you can see their tracks. And so you're kind of over there by yourself. And so I got to have a lot of alone time during my Stone Age month at night. And my family would come and read to me because I said I can't read a book. So they'd read me stuff and I'd pray and they'd read me like scriptures and stuff and we'd have our little family prayer time. But then everybody would go. And then I'd be out there by myself under the stars. And so I had a lot of prayers and time to think about every one of my children and everybody I've ever loved and pray for all my people, right? And I realized that I'd been praying for their health and their safety. And I think I got my prayers answered. I think Susana should have been dead according to the physics of the wreck. But I think the angel stepped in and it's not like all me, but I do know that I'd been conscious of her and every one of my children. So, just so you know what a bad boy I am, I got 10 kids, 7 that are my blood and 3 more that I've raised or helped raise with their moms by 4 different moms. And every one of them was going to be my woman for life. They're always going to, but, the first one I told you about, Delia, she split and it left me with the baby while I was living in a teepee with 9 goats in the canyons around here. But that was going to be my woman forever. And that didn't happen. I mean, so I kept what I'd call tumbling down. I kept making more and more concessions. Maybe I should have a house. Maybe they'll like me if I got a house or wore pants or something, So I started wearing pants when I married Gloria.
What were you wearing before?
Like kilts or skirts, made out of buckskin, or I like to be free, and you can run faster and jump higher if you don't have any constrictions. So a lot of times I lived in boxers. I would sew the flies up on boxer shorts, and count that as my clothing. So I was pretty unaware of how dumb and weird I looked to a lot of people, probably for about 20 years during the middle of my life.
You're kind of living out when you're doing this.
Yeah, but I'd come to town and not switch it up at all. I mean, when I'd go to church finally, when I got older, I started going back to church, right? I love all those folks over there at the chapel. But I can remember some of those older ladies that had been watching me walk around when I was in my 20s with no clothes on, going, Dave, it's good to see you with your clothes on, So, I mean, I don't know. When I see somebody like that now, I'm almost like, whoa, that's how weird I looked. I was pretty dumb about how unaware I was of my effect on the people around me.
What's the intersection for you between the natural world being a church and then the Mormon church?
Well, I was a Presbyterian, a Quaker. I've gone to Jewish seders. Lots of times I go to Native American ceremonies all my life. I go to any church. And one time when I was AWOL from religion for quite some time, I would go back sometimes and visit churches just to see if I could feel the spirit there. And I always do. Wherever I go, I feel the spirit. Well, one time one of my uncles at a Mormon church in Tucson where I used to go when I was a kid, he saw me and Juan there. And we were Presbyterians at the time working for the sanctuary movement in El Salvador and other places. He sees me and he comes up after church and he goes, David, did you feel the Spirit? And I said, yes. And he goes, oh, that's great. And then I said, I feel the Spirit when I get with anybody who's good-hearted and believes in God and is genuinely worshiping their true faith. Like, I don't know what your faith is, but I feel really good around you. And when you're into your ceremony, I feel it, and I believe that the Spirit is attending it to my heart. So I don't think I have the same rigid boundaries that a lot of other people have.
Well, that's why I asked, because I've seen you be so fulfilled by the water and a creek. And I'm like, so when I look at any of organized religion, it is boundaries to me.
Well, it's a bunch of people.
So it's the vibe from the people. Like,
It's and at one point, let me finish my story. So I'm in the foyer of a church I'd gone to as a little kid. And my uncle's all excited, and then he's disappointed because I said I feel the Spirit everywhere I go. And he's like, ah. And then he looked at my son Juan, who was about 5 at that time, or 6, because we were visiting Tucson. And he goes, Juan, how do you feel here? And we'd been going to a Presbyterian community of really beautiful people. And he just goes, well, the Normans, they don't serve donuts. And so
that's practical.
His
I like
comment on that church service was that it was okay, but there was no donuts, because they always had coffee and donuts after at the Presbyterian church. And so he just didn't like the fact that there was no donuts.
Sure.
And so my uncle laughed and kind of broke the tension there of like, how come you're not back to the fold? But I am a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And for a long time, my Christian friends that were warning me that it's a bunch of really evil people who, the higher they get up, the more wicked they are, and you're just being bilked and sucked and vampired by, psychic, emotional vampire systems. And I just said, wherever there's 2 or more gathered in my name, that's a Jesus quote. Jesus said that once. I'll be there too. And so I always just say, I'm not here to judge who's in the building. I don't come to your ceremonies and start looking at who belongs here and who doesn't, and who's really getting into this and who isn't, or who's being really, totally into whatever we're doing, and who's just phony and here for the babes or for the notoriety. I mean, I don't go there. I never have. It's a waste. It's a real big waste of time judging. And so I just try to feel the intent. I don't care if somebody's Buddhist or whatever else. If they're not living up to what they believe in, and they're failing often in public or in their own personal secret life, if they're doing it for the right reasons and they keep trying, they're going to get good at it one of these days.
Yeah.
They're going to get really good at it. So I think you get what you aim for. And whatever, if it really helps, great. And if you're there for the wrong reasons, I don't care what the activity is. If you're at the rodeo and your intentions aren't jiving with your real inner self, then you're just not where you belong. And so I don't have as strict a sense of what's right and wrong in somebody else's view, some other religious or non-religious. I mean, you can have an atheist who's just as much of a rule-making, narrow-minded person as you could a religionist or a scientist or whatever. You could take your set of rules and build yourself a prison, or you could maybe look for ways of letting those things help you have a more expansive, bigger view of our, what I would call, not even universe, because that's probably pretty limiting. In my way of thinking, it just goes on and on and on, inward and outward, all directions. And so I don't, and you know what? People don't know the religion I attend very well. And even members of the church that are members of my church don't know their religion very well. And I'm one of them probably. But when I look at the most beautiful principles I've learned in a sweat lodge, or from some hitchhiker that, just doesn't believe in anything but's really good at like hitchhiking. I mean, there's just so many ways of being a human being that every time I've allowed myself to really hear the messages that resonate with the best part of me, the happiest part of me, there's no conflict. And so I've read some of the most beautiful things I've ever read in my life are by men and women from my own faith that know what I'm talking, what I've just told you. They know it on levels I'm just barely beginning to get. And when I recognize it in any other place, I don't say, oh, that matches what I believe. I'm like, oh, lots of people, when they aim for the light, they get it all over the planet. And so I kind of have, that's even a doctrinal thing in my church. They say it doesn't matter what you believe. If you're actually living correct principles, you get the benefits from living those principles. Doesn't matter who you are, what religion or non-religion you are, what country or continent you come from. If you're living if you do certain things a certain way, you get exactly the results of that effort. So it's kind of scientific in some ways if you think about it. If you're in a chemistry class and you put certain amount of things in the test tube, you get a result.
The human condition in a way. But there was a prime.
So like I said, I went AWOL from my church and every other church. And when people would ask me, do you believe in organized religion? I said, no, but I love molecular organization. I like the way things are shaped, and I like how what I've observed and smelled and touched and felt and spiritually vibed into on planet Earth is so amazing that if that's the doorway to anything else, I'm in.
You want all the colors.
I love every flavor, every color, every experience. And I had a chance at one point from my brokenheartedness with Delia of not feeling the pain. And I remember when she left, it felt like somebody was taking barbed wire. This is literal. Think of this. If somebody took barbed wire and wrapped it around your heart, and I'd build a lot of fences. And when we tried to keep those H-posts together, we'd take barbed wire and wrap them at X's, and then we'd take sticks and we'd wrap that barbed wire in circles until it would tighten up and make these big tension bars. Felt like somebody wrapped my heart in barbed wire and then put a stick through it and was twisting it to make it grip tighter around my heart. And it was a physical pain, and it felt like they were pulling it out of my back between my shoulder blades. And it took about 6 months for it to get to its highest pain level. So 6 months after she left, I was still feeling depressed, unable to get my life together. I was a single parent to a 6-month-old baby, so I had to like cook and eat and get out of bed because I had to change diapers and take care of the baby. But I had no reason for living except that kid, right? I wanted to die. Well, that explained, I will tell you that one day I was praying and I was laying on a couch. I'd gone to visit my parents. I was really depressed and they were gone. So I just laid on their big black leather couch and I sank in to this moment where I was praying and this beautiful sense of peace washed over my entire body. And I got this message that says, if you want to feel like this, you can stay here. You can stay in this place of no pain if you want. And then I somehow sensed that it wasn't as educational as the full experience of being a human being.
Right.
And so it's like I hear a lot of near-death things where people aren't in pain anymore, and then they choose to go back to their pain-racked bodies because they want to finish this thing. So I had that moment while still alive with no wreck, just laying there. I drifted out of all that, and I chose to go back to having a full life experience. And I said, if I can learn the most here and get the most out of life by feeling all these things, I want to feel things. I don't want to separate from the full experience. And so, that's what happened to me when I was younger. I'd start smoking weed with friends because it felt like it would be fun, and then it would feel like a separation, and pretty soon I'm watching life on TV rather than being there. So anything that, there's been times when I've had like mushrooms, where all of a sudden everybody in the whole world's my cousin and we're all in love and we like each other. And I feel that on a normal day. But when certain things help you connect more with everything, I like those feelings. But anything that separates me from other people, including my own way of being, I want to just leave it behind.
And that, my friends, is the end of part 1 of this conversation. David, as I'm sure he would say, has the gift of gab. And this conversation went on another 45 minutes. And he kept saying, like, this is the last thing I'm going to say, but I felt like he got more and more vulnerable as we continued on. And so I'm going to release the second part of this conversation in next week's 10 Laws podcast. That'll be part 2 of Dave Holladay. This song that you are hearing in the background is called Groundwork, the edit version, which is on the Spores album. Spores is available wherever you listen to music digitally. It's also available, still a few vinyl left, at music.eastforest.org, along with the other merch items. Thank you, everyone who's been digging into the merch. It's a great way to help support the project in these pandemic times. In addition to sharing this podcast, giving it a review, making posts, just spreading the good word about our East Forest community and waking each other up one melody at a time, one conversation, one loving awareness witness moment to the next moment. Okay, friends, I will see you next week. You know what? I wanted to tell you, I got a lovely piece of, I'm going to call it straight up fan mail in my P.O. box here in Boulder, which I don't know how I don't remember giving that out, but it was nice. So thank you, Shay, for sending a card and telling me about a really important journey that you had with the Music from Mushrooms album. I totally vibe with what you're saying, and it's really, really meaningful that you took the time to write that and send it to me. So if you guys want to send anything that's legal, because I don't want my rural post office box sniffing boxes that smell a little green, you can do that to P.O. Box 1480, Boulder, Utah, 84716. Okay, thanks, guys. I'm going to go back to the snow and listening to lots of long-form music. Keep walking your walk. Don't take any shit, but if you do, do it with grace.